You can use switch statement instead of using multiple if statements. I have 3 if conditions here. One is checking if the name is Jane, then I want to set the message to Jane as a teacher. If the name is Monica, then I want to set the message as Monica is a landscape architect, that's my wife. And if the name is Fahad, then I want to set the message as Fahad is a software engineer, that's me. So instead of writing these multiple if statements, I would like to use switch statement to make my code look cleaner. To do that, I'm going to say that switch, in which I'm going to pass the name of the variable that I want to compare values against, which is going to be name. And then I want to open a code block in which I'm going to write some cases. I'm going to write cases for Jane, Monica, and Fahad. First case will be for Jane, in which I'm going to pass the value Jane. That means when the name is Jane, then I want to execute a code block that I'm going to write after this colon. And then I'm going to write the code block, which is message equal to Jane is a teacher. And then to end this code block, I'm going to use break statement. So this is how you write one case in your switch statement. We'll have to write 2 more cases for Monica and Fahad. So I'm going to copy this code and paste it 2 more times, and then write cases for Monica. So I'm going to set the case to Monica and then set the message as Monica is a landscape architect. And then I'm going to write case for me and set the message as Fahad is a software engineer. Once I'm done with that, then I don't need these if statements. I can get rid of them. And now if I refresh the page, then it's going to print Jane is a teacher because name is set to Jane. But if I change the name to Monica and then refresh the page, it's going to say Monica is a landscape architect. If I change the name to Fahad and then refresh the page, it's going to print Fahad is a software engineer. If I change the name to John, which is not part of the cases, then it's going to print no message because message gets set to no message here and none of the cases are true, and that's what's getting printed here. But you can handle this as a default case too. If none of the cases are getting true, then you can handle that in the default case. You can say that default, if none of the cases are true, then I would like to execute this code block, which is going to be message equal to no message. And then I don't need to set this message here. That gets handled in the default case. If I refresh the page, it's going to say no message here. You can also combine 2 cases together. Let's say if Jane and Monica, both of them are landscape architect, and you want to print landscape architect for both of them, then you can combine 2 cases like this. You can have the cases on top of each other, and then you can print the name by concatenating the variable. You can say that name plus, which is going to be either Jane or Monica, and then I want to print this message. If I change this back to Jane and then refresh the page, it's going to say Jane is a landscape architect. If I change this to Monica, then also it's going to say Monica is a landscape architect. Switch statements are strict comparisons if you cannot change the data type of your variables here. If I change this to number, and even if the values are same, then it's not gonna work. So make sure that you're using strict comparison and using the same data types when you're using switch comparisons here. In the next section, I'm going to talk about for loop.